Hi there. I'm going to do a review for Superman 3. This movie came out in 1983. It was directed by Richard Lester. This movie departs a little bit from the previous two movies, which were sort of interconnected movies. This Superman movie kind of follows a new path and a new villain. Gone as Lex Luthor for a little bit. Instead, we get a new villain, new stuff. Nonetheless, it also even doesn't really have Lois Lane in it. So you end up with Christopher Reeve playing Superman. Perry White's still in there for a little bit. But honestly, most of the main cast is different than this movie. Superman 3 is remarkably different from the other Superman movies. They decided to bring in a new villain, a billionaire mogul, basically named Ross Webster. And more or less, this is also it's Richard Pryor, and Robert Vaughn playing Gus Gorman and Ross Webster. But more or less, this movie is kind of like where I guess Richard Lester was going to go with Superman 2 if he had more of the reins. It's not quite the same way as the other two movies at all. It's remarkably different. It kind of opens up sort of the same in some small ways. It does have some comedic timing in it, but it's got a severe problem is that because they wanted to make a different movie, it doesn't really know what all it wants to be. It doesn't go straight forward with it. It's the whole point. The whole plot is that Richard Pryor plays Gus Gorman, who basically is looking for a job. He goes and gets a job, and he's not happy with his pay. And because of somehow magically he's a computer, somehow magically he's just a computer whiz, he starts messing around to try and get more money out of the company. And of course, head office kind of figures out that there's something wrong with the payroll, and of course they get him hauled in to say what is going on with this and what are you doing? They're about technically one would think he'd be about ready to be fired, but instead the boss sees wisdom in having this guy around because he says, you know what, we're gonna work together, man, because you figured out something in our system. And instead of tossing you, I'm gonna use you to help me get rid of some people. I'm gonna use you to help me design a new computer. And it was so funny because unlike normal bosses who would have just tossed him into, this one says, no, we're gonna use him. We're gonna make use of this guy. We're gonna do something with him. And ultimately, they do. It was actually kind of an interesting movie in a small way because this one actually introduces Lana Lang for about 2 seconds. Actually, one thing about Superman is that Clark Kent actually has to head off to Smallville for some reason. I think he was doing a homecoming or something like that. I'm not entirely sure what he was doing, 10 or 20 years reunion. But nonetheless, it happens. And more or less it turns into a movie that's interesting and different. Um, and that's where the kind of the problem starts as this movie vaults in a totally different direction than the other two. It's more or less its own self-contained storyline. It has some of the basic stuff in it. Ironically enough, this one here is also the one where, if you're familiar with any Canadian cities, this one clearly has an establishing shot of Calgary. But and it's funny because that's supposed to be the fill-in for Metropolis. But nonetheless, this movie here, Clark goes off to Homecoming for a little bit just to meet some of his old uh, co-pals, co-students, and stuff like that. But nonetheless, different kind of movie, and he meets up with his old flame Lana Lang from Smallville, and it's actually kind of an amusing movie there for a bit. Meanwhile, Gus Gorman and Gus and Ross are deciding to design a brand new computer that's going to do all these amazing things. The theory is to try and get rid of Superman. They're trying to build a computer that'll defeat Superman, and that's the whole point to what they're trying to do is get rid of Superman. Um, and it's kind of a weird computer because it's built like a very old model computer. It's not built to be a small computer. It's not a super fast small computer. Instead, it's what people imagine computers still were in 1983 when this movie came out. They still imagined computers were were going to be big devices. The bigger computers are still faster than small computers, even though that technically wasn't really the case anymore. Um, but yeah, you get these you get this new advanced computer built that can supposedly do all these things. And of course, Gus is not having any problems with this because he's he's a kind of a confusing character. One can't even define him as a proper villain. This movie does not take itself all that seriously. Neither of the bad guys is particularly terrible at all. Actually, it's kind of funny and ironic is that unlike Lex Luthor in the first two movies, this movie here does not treat the villains with um, any kind of true villainy. The truth is he's just a standard billionaire guy, and yes, he's a little bit evil here and there, but more or less he's more of a silly villain. He's more of a silly comic book villain. But I don't know. It runs into its share of problems because eventually Superman has to come back from Smallville and has to deal with these guys because they've done all these things. Not much has really happened though because he's only offering the quartet of defeating Superman. The computer, I think, was also supposed to be like for taking over the world, manipulating the stock markets, things like that. So it's not. It's just kind of a funny movie because it does so many things differently than you would think. But nonetheless, as the movie progresses, things get interesting. Superman has a few oddball rescues. There's one involving what is it, a chemical plant or something like that, where he ends up putting a sheet of ice from a lake on top of it and letting it rain down, and it puts the fire out. But nonetheless, it's not too bad. I don't know. I don't mind this movie. It's not that bad. It's just not. It's very comedic. It's very comedic in comparison to Superman 1 and 2. And it's a sign of the decline of the series already, because that was the problem with these movies, is that the decline was really quick. It's not a slow decline, it's actually a really quick decline. And by the time the movie's done and they're trying to figure out how to defeat the computer, more or less, like Superman, like this is a computer that's designed to take on Superman, and of course he's having problems with it because of course it's defeating him in some serious ways. Um, but nonetheless, it ends up being defeated. It does produce one kind of hard to watch sequence. The one villainous woman ends up getting turned into like a machine, and what actually happens to her is kind of like over the top and silly, but it's also kind of a nasty turn of events for her because at that point in time it wasn't like just for her to be turned into a robot like cyborg of sorts. Yeah, it had its problems, but nonetheless, it's interesting. It tries to have fun with itself. It's a curious movie, but nonetheless, I think the biggest problem with Superman 3 is that it's too much of almost too much of a departure from the other two movies. This movie here is like just everything is different about it. It doesn't have the same villains at all. Lex Luthor is not in this movie at all. That's the amusing thing about this movie is how little as Lex Luthor's not in there. Lois Lane's barely in the movie. I think she had to go on a trip or something like that, and so therefore there's no chatter about it. And so you end up with this new movie that's got no. He ends up in Smallville, so he's talking to his old flame, Lana Lang, and Lana Lang ends up coming into work for the Daily Planet. So it's all right. Of course, Lois Lane sees her and kind of realizes, oh no, I got some competition. And Yeah, it's a cool movie. It's fun. It's a comic book movie. What else you gonna ask for? It has good spots. It's got some minor problems, but oh yeah, the other whole arc of this movie is that they tried to replicate kryptonite for Superman, and in fact, instead of replicating kryptonite, they got some other chemical that just turned him into bad Superman, which was ironic. But nonetheless, of course, they got the recipe wrong because obviously you're not going to be able to make kryptonite because this is not the Earth. The only kryptonite they have is from his home planet. And unfortunately, there's got to be some elements that are missing, so they put tobacco in there instead. And of course, they end up with this stuff that doesn't make Superman go, weaken Superman. Instead, it makes him mean Superman. And nonetheless, he figures out how to beat himself in a fight, and he ends up in a contest. But there, it's all right. It's like they say, these are interesting, weird subplots in here between the evil Superman stuff and other things. It doesn't really totally work, but it's a comic book movie. So there.